Hey everyone, let's look at adding, subtracting, and multiplying complex numbers now. Now, once we start doing this, it might seem actually more intuitive than you might imagine. Let's look at it and see what it does. We got 8 minus 10i minus negative 16 plus 2i. Okay, to do this, we'd do this just like we do any other problem. We would have 8 minus 10i. We distribute this negative in as we normally would do. We get plus, let's see, minus times minus 16 would be plus 16. Minus on 2i would be minus I, or minus 2i. There we go. And then we combine like terms. 8 plus 16 would be 24. And the minus 10i and minus 2i together gives us minus 12i. And that's really it. We're done. We distribute it in and put them together. And I really just kind of gets treated right now like a variable. It just looks and acts and tastes like a variable. And even though it really is just a square root of -1, that's just kind of how we're treating it at this moment. And it works out just fine. So we get 24 minus 12i. And that's it. Easy peasy. That's all we have to do. Now we get to multiplying complex numbers. It gets a little bit more complicated, but it's still pretty straightforward. All we got to do is remember a few important rules. For example, I is a square root of -1. And then what it means, we have I to certain powers from before. I to the first is I to the second is -1, I to the third is -I to the fourth is 1, and so on. Okay, so because like after that becomes I to the fifth is I again, and I to the sixth is -1 again, and so and so on and so forth. So let's start by distributing this 3i into the 15 plus 2i and just see where it takes us. So we get 3i times 15 plus 2i times 3i. Okay, well, 3i times 15, we can put that together. 3 times 15 is 45, 45i. And then 2i times 3i. Remember, we're using PEMDAS. We're doing the multiplication first before we do the addition. We are doing 2 times 3 is 6. And then I times I would be I squared. Now, here's the thing. And this is really helpful and important to know. Anytime you see an I squared, you can and should always just immediately change it into a -1. In fact, whenever you get an answer to any problem, it'll never end up being, you'll never need to have an I squared or an I cubed or an I to the fourth. There will never be any of that in your answer. The answer will always just have I. Everything reduces down to I to the first or a number. It will always, always, always reduce down to I to the first or a number. Keep that in mind. It's very helpful and helps simplify things a whole lot. So out of the square, I squared, it simplifies down just to -1. So we'll get 45i plus 6 times a -1. So it gives us 45i minus 6. Or to write that back in the proper standard, a plus bi form, that's -6 plus 45i. We'll put that in the box, and we're done. Simple as that. So again, and if you don't want to even remember all the blue stuff that I put on the side just now, you can just remember that I squared is -1, and that'll carry you 90% of the way. So let's move on to the next one and see how that works as well. 1 plus 5i times -3 minus I. At this point, you might even start to catch on and start to realize that we can just work this problem just like any other problem we worked before as well. This is, you can use any method you want to for this. The easiest one is probably just foiling it. So let's just FOIL it out and see what we get. So FOIL. First, that'd be 1 times a -3. That would be -3. The outers, 1 times -I, which would be minus I. Let's see, the inners would be plus 5i times -3, so that'd be minus 15i. And the lasts would be plus 5i times -I. So that'd be plus 5i times -I, which, as you might imagine, would be minus 5i squared. Okay, so we got -3 minus I, minus 15i, minus 5i squared. Great. The minus 5i squared, you just look at that and immediately say there's an I squared, that's -1. So we'll say minus 5, -1. Immediately change that, simplifies your life a whole lot. So we get minus 3 minus I minus 15i minus 5 times -1. Okay, the minus I and the minus 15i, those can combine together just like any other variable would. So that becomes minus 16i. The minus 3 stays at minus 3. The minus 5 times -1, that's plus 5. Minus 5 times -1 is plus 5. Minus times minus. Let's see, the -3 and the plus 5 come together to become a positive 2. So that's 2 minus 16i. That's in the a plus bi form. And that's it. We're done. 2 minus 16i. Cool.